welcome. We're excited to see you on this December day. Please go ahead and put in your name and your company that you work for and where you're coming from today, where you're zooming in from. Put it in the chat section. We also have a polling question that we're going to have up here for a minute, just letting our speakers know what parts of the state people are coming from. Yeah, quite the attendance list, so we're going to give it a couple minutes before we get started. So very excited. For those of you that are just joining us, please put your name and your organization that you work for and where you're zooming in from today. We also have a polling question, just allowing our speakers to see who all is coming or attending today from across the state. It's like the Metro region's winning it so far. Welcome to those who are coming in. Please put your name and your organization that you work for into the chat section and let us know where you're coming from. Give it one more minute here. We're just hitting the 10 o'clock hour. All right, for those who are coming in, welcome. Please introduce yourself in our chat section. Let us know your name, your organization, and where you're zooming in from today. Looks like the Southwest is starting to catch up. Oh, maybe not. Maybe the Metro is out winning. All right. We can go ahead and end our poll here and show the results. And if you're just coming in, please introduce yourselves in the chat section and let us know what organization you work for and where you're zooming in from today. Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get us started today. Welcome, everybody. I am Kim Woodworth, and I have the great pleasure of being the Executive Director of the Economic Development Council of Colorado. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. You've all entered into this webinar on mute, but we don't want you to stay on mute. This is a very casual webinar. We want you to ask questions. We want you to participate with our panelists today. So please, we encourage you to either drop your question into the chat section or raise your hand and we'll answer your questions as we go through this. There's no real specific layout for this, so you're not interrupting anything. We really want to be able to answer the questions that you have in order to help you become the best BRNA program consultant there is. So if you have any questions about this webinar, please send them to our administrator, Bobby. She's putting her email address into the chat section. We will also follow up with today's webinar with a link to the video as well as the presentation. We will also post it to our website under the Knowledge Network series, and then also the Knowledge Vault. And finally, please follow us today on today's discussion on our social media outlets. And please use the hashtag Knowledge Network and EDC events so that we can follow you. For those of you who are new to us today, EDCC is a statewide industry association that supports the economic development efforts across the state of Colorado. We connect our communities and our members and our partners to high-quality educational opportunities and trusted resources, and advocate for sound policies and programs that support a vibrant economy and enhance quality of life for all of Colorado. The EDCC has built a virtual arsenal of information to keep our professionals updated on the latest trends, data, and case studies, and our thought leadership papers that our professionals can take back to our local leaders to begin these important discussions at the local level. Make this feature part of your ongoing professional development and tool that you can use to help inform, educate, and transform your community. I'd like to take a quick moment to share with you our preliminary 2024 events and programming lineup. Coming soon is our annual Legislative Day at the Capitol and luncheon on February 1st. We'll be at the First Baptist Church of Denver. We are seeking sponsorships and our registration is live. Bobby is dropping those links into the chat section right now, so be sure to visit our website for that information. Also, planning and preparing for your budget, which most of us have already done. But we have our basic economic development course that happens annually, June 10th through the 14th. We are still working on the location, but it will be somewhere in the Metro Denver area. The BEDC course, or Basic Economic Development course, provides a substantial introduction to the theory and fundamentals of comprehensive economic development. The formal instruction emphasizes beneficial development that can result from a constructive actions of local leaders and revolves around 5 major themes: innovative community development concepts, regional economics, basic factors in development, technique of economic development, and trends in economic development. So now, without further ado, let's move on to today's Knowledge Network series. Approximately 80% of new jobs and capital investment originate from existing companies within your community. The primary objectives of business retention involves offering support for issues that could jeopardize a company's survival or lead to closure, as well as discouraging companies from relocating to different communities. Conversely, the central aim of business expansion is to facilitate the growth of those businesses. A thriving business retention, expansion, and attraction, because we are talking about attraction today, program not only addresses the challenges that existing businesses face, but also serves as a valuable source of data and intelligence. This information is instrumental in strategically attracting new companies to the community and nurturing the establishment of new businesses. In essence, a successful BRNE and A program acts as a catalyst for both the preservation and expansion of the local business landscape. This programming cannot be credited or should be credited to the Professional Development Committee for devising today's session and series. They are a group of amazing professionals with great energy and leadership led by Shannon Hine at the City of Fort Collins and Tyler Purvis with the City of Brush. If you are a member and interested in getting involved, we've dropped their contact information into the chat section. Also, we cannot thank our devoted sponsors enough for supporting this series, City of Westminster and Xcel Energy. They are really instrumental in lifting EDCC's efforts in distributing information across Colorado and helping build a strong economic development system. So thank you to City of Westminster and Xcel Energy. So with that, I'd like to introduce to you today's moderator, Adam Kruger, Economic Development Director for the City of Thornton and EDCC's 2024 Vice Chair of the Board of Directors. Adam has 15 years of experience in economic development, market research, and management. Additionally, Adam is a certified economic developer. Let's give Adam a warm Zoom welcome. Adam, we're turning it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. Good morning, everybody. Really excited to be here. As Kim mentioned, I'm the Economic Development Director for the City of Thornton, and I'll be playing the role of your modernist today. So, since I'm the moderator and a panelist, I just kind of crunch those words together. So, hopefully, you like that joke because I'm not going to get much better than that as we move forward here. I'm excited to be here this morning. I'm really passionate about the Knowledge Network series. I've been a part of the Professional Development Committee for a number of years, and it's really a great group of folks they're really passionate about coming up with tools and resources that can help professionals and economic developers. And then the Knowledge Network series is a unique event that we started a few years ago, and as Kim mentioned, it really kind of focuses in on specific topics that are important for economic developers. And as you know, today's topic is attraction and business retention expansion. So if you don't know that, or for some reason you clicked on this and weren't aware, then you can make a graceful exit, I'm sure. But we're glad you're all here. We got a great turnout today. We've got a panel full of really smart people. I realize that might sound a little self-serving since I'm also on the panel, but we do have a lot of really smart people on this panel. I'm going to introduce the panelists, and they're each going to take a minute or two to kind of talk about their background. I'm going to start with Troy McHugh, who's the Executive Director for Lincoln County EDC. Troy, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. Troy McHugh. I office here in Lyman in rural Lincoln County. I am representing the rural portion of this talk. We are a very small county. We only have about 5,700 people in the entire county, and about 900 of them are in the Lyman Correctional Facility. So we only have about 4,600 free folk running around. But nonetheless, we manage our little economy between the towns of Hugo and Lyman. We also have some smaller towns, Arab and Genoa. But been at this job a little over 8.5 years, going on 9. Love the work and love what we can do for our local community. So I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
And thanks, Troy. Next, we've got Drew Kramer, who's the Economic Development Program Manager for Tri-State Generation and Transmission. And he's also the EDCC chair, outgoing chair as this year ends and we move on next year. So, Drew, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Adam. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. Yes, I'm Drew Kramer with Tri-State. For those not familiar with Tri-State, we are the wholesale power supplier to 42 rural utilities across 4 states. I know we're called Tri-State. We originally served only eastern Colorado, western Nebraska, and parts of Wyoming. And over time, we're about 70 years old at this point. And as a couple of other generation and transmission companies went bankrupt, some of their members joined us. We took on territory in western Colorado and eventually added New Mexico. So our collective service territory today, serving these 42 rural utilities, is around 200,000 square miles. And that's, for perspective, that's 20% larger than the state of California. So if you imagine California with only about 1 million residents instead of the 40 million residents it actually has, that's how rural we're talking. So 1 million people spread over an area bigger than the state of California. We serve, again, central Wyoming, northeast New Mexico, western Nebraska, and a fair chunk of rural Colorado as well. So I'm here today to represent kind of the corporate view on this, but I'll also join with Troy, I'm sure, to talking a little bit about rural challenges in terms of economic development, business retention and expansion in rural areas. So happy to be here. Happy to join the panel. Thank you, Adam.
Yeah, thank you, Drew. And then we've also got Donna Bakshani, who is a global business specialist for Colorado Office of Economic Development and International Trade. Donna, would you care to take a couple minutes to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dana. I'm one of the Global Business Development Specialists at OEdit. I work with the Global Business Development Division. And just to give you a little background, or in case you don't know, we're a team of 16 right now, and we're divided into a few smaller teams. So we have a strategy and analytics team. We have a team that manages the advanced industry grants. And then also we have the Global Business Development team, which includes me and my colleagues, Elise Heyman and Mike Landis, that you might have already worked with. We all have very specific industry we are focusing on. I, for example, mainly focus on energy storage, bioscience, ag tech. It's just a little easier to really get knowledgeable in these industries. And so whenever we get a lead, each of us takes a particular project. We are also supported by 2 industry managers, one in the aerospace and defense industry, Robert Belatek, and one in the semiconductor industry, who is Daniel Savetti. I personally moved to Colorado almost 4 years ago. I'm originally from Germany, not Colorado, and I joined OEdit at the beginning of this year. My background is in project management. I work for project management and market research for BMW in Germany for a couple of years, and here in Denver also mainly in market research before joining OEdit. And I'm very happy I could join today because I like to talk a little bit more about how we attract new prospects and how we do the prospects alerts that many of you probably receive. And yeah, we don't always have the chance to talk in person. So I hope that shed some light on like how OEdit plans their prospects.
Absolutely. We're looking forward to hearing more about that, Donna. Thank you. Real quick, Kim gave a little bit of an intro on me, but I've been in economic development in Colorado for about 15 years. I worked in Northern Colorado for first few years, and I've been in Thornton about 12 years. Pretty much the entire time I've been doing business attraction and retention work. And my previous work prior to coming to a municipality was for a regional 501c6 group. So I've got some experience in both the regional and the kind of municipal economic development side, which are a little bit different. So with that, we do want this to be interactive. As Kim mentioned earlier, we're going to do we've got some prepared questions, but if you guys have things you'd like to ask throughout, please shoot stuff in the chat or raise your hand, and we'll get those questions answered as we go on, and then we'll try to save some time at the end for your questions as well. Cool. So I'm going to dig right in. I'm going to start with Troy. Troy, first question for you is, tell us about the importance of business retention in today's economy.
When small business is challenged with all kinds of things, with inflationary pressures, with pandemic effects, with acute labor shortfall, which we hear about all the time, challenges with workforce, it just becomes so essential that business retention is a big part of keeping your local economy together. And that's something that we've experienced a great deal, in that we really try to keep as many small businesses open as possible and keep them from shuttering. As you know, that once a small business shutters, it becomes, in my mind, a black hole of non-activity. Your downtown looks much less vibrant, and you've really backed up in terms of what you're trying to get done to keep your business community viable and vibrant. So obviously, in economic development, we focus so much on business expansion and attraction, and those are very, very important pieces. But as Kim indicated in her intro remarks, over 80% of that expansion of the local tax base comes from within. And we can't underestimate how important that retention piece is. When I first got my job, we were largely county funded at the time. And my county commissioner said, Troy, as economic development director, I think it's great. You're going to, have a chance to attract some new business partners, and I think that's great. She says, but out here we realize there might be a good amount of time between those events. So in the meantime, you got to fill all this time in the middle with good business retention, which means servicing our existing business community. And I think that is so important, not only to preserve your tax base, but also to keep your local politics in place so that you don't get into this problem that sometimes, or criticism that comes to an economic development effort that says, why is it that you guys roll out the red carpet for everybody outside of our town or outside of our city or outside of our county when we've been here for 20 years? What the heck? So I think the messaging and the realities need to be a big part as a practitioner, is that your agency or your economic development organization is just as dedicated to servicing your existing community as you are attracting outsiders. I think the incentives have to also be said. They're just available for everybody, existing as they are new. The only reason that oftentimes existing businesses that are growing slowly don't access some of those incentives, because many incentives are based on certain thresholds, like at least a minimum of $500,000 or $1 million invested, or at least 5 new jobs created. So it is natural that existing businesses don't as often access certain incentives. but the messaging needs to be there that they can. And that if they have, for instance, if we're going to attract a new hotel to Lyman, great. We'll try to see what we can do for them. But if an existing hotel wants to add a wing and spend $500,000 and create 5 new jobs, then they should be right there in line at equal footing with your outside folks. And that really helps keep your local politics and kind of keeps you out of hot water and helps you address those criticisms to say that we are just as dedicated to our existing business as we are outside business. And if you look at the math, the retention piece actually should be the most important part of that. So.
Yeah, well said. And maybe at the risk of being a terrible moderator already, I'm going to jump off script, Troy, and follow up on one thing that you mentioned there. How do you engage some of your those leaders in the community with your existing businesses? I mean, you touched on kind of the importance of the education piece. Do you do certain things to kind of get some of your local leaders, and your businesses connected?
Correct. And when you look through the IEDC curriculum for business retention, they talk very much about small business survey. And I think that's a great way to get started. Once you become familiar, and we're so rural out here, it's almost like I see all our small businesses all the time. And so we don't necessarily execute a formal survey maybe as often as we could. And maybe that's something we could improve on. But one thing I notice is that we try to listen as carefully as we can to our local community. I do have regular social media posts that we do out just for information purposes. I also put an article every week in the printed newspaper. And we just try to get the word out and work really closely with our local government so that and our financial partners and real estate partners, so that we do get those referrals. And that if we hear a small business is struggling or is about to shut their doors or has really needing some assistance, we try to reach out to them and say, hey, we understand that perhaps you'd like some consulting to try to help you with some of those issues. We do rely heavily on our toolbox of Small Business Development Center, SBDC tools to do that. And it seems to work pretty well. Of course, you got to be awfully sensitive when a business is really struggling and you knock on their front door and go in and say, hey, you don't want to say, hey, I hear you're about to go broke. That's going to insult them pretty quick. Instead, it's going to be, hey, we understand that perhaps you had some questions or things that we could assist with, whether it be accounting, workforce, marketing, you name it. And so a lot of it is what I would say our outreach to our small business community is everyday gardening, organic conversations and things, and then our media outreach the best we can. I'm a big supporter if each EDO would like to do the more formal survey. I think that's a great plan. I think it's a really good best practice, especially for an economic developer who's just getting started in their community and they're not particularly familiar with everybody. I've been out here, in this job for almost 9 years, so I'm pretty darn familiar with all the different businesses that are here. So that makes it a little bit more intrinsically easy to figure out, or try to keep up on what's going on. But I would say that those are some of the things that we do to try to engage our small business community.
Yeah, that's great. And I think sometimes we look at BRE and attraction as two totally separate animals. And I would say that that's not exactly the case, right? I mean, it's important to have the relationship with your existing businesses because a lot of the new businesses coming in, eventually, obviously, they come into your community, they're going to be existing businesses and they want to know that they're getting the attention when they're there. To your point earlier, Troy, that they got when you were trying to woo them. I mean, we have businesses all the time when they come and visit our community. They like to talk to our existing business community. If they talk to them and the response from the community is, I don't know, those guys never talked to me. I haven't heard from them in 4 years. That doesn't go over so well, right? Versus, oh yeah, we talk to them every year. We get a lot of information from them, whatever. They feel the love. It really does impact your attraction side as well. So they're not mutually exclusive, right?
Correct.
Great, thanks, Troy.
Plus,
go ahead.
existing businesses sometimes can feel threatened by new competition. And of course, we all know in a vibrant economy, we want many players, and that competition can actually be a really good thing. However, human nature, sometimes they default to a fear of competition. If they don't feel like they're getting equitable treatment from the Economic Development Office, you're likely going to hear about it. And it might be back through a commissioner or a mayor or a councilman that's going to get you in hot water. So it's just really good to stay out front and make sure you're trying to be as equitable, and at least the narrative that you're pushing is equitable for everybody, especially your ones who are already there.
Absolutely. And before I jump to the next, Drew, I'm going to come to you next, but I got a hand up. Steve. Mr.
Hi,
Hart, how's
thanks
it going,
for-
sir? Thanks for.
Kim said this was interactive, so I'm going to make a statement. So yeah, we as economic developers tend to do a pretty lousy job at the retention portion. We say everyone, you're the greatest thing is we attract them in, and then once they get in, we never talk to them. And then especially with the small business, you're right. It's tough to address them. I had in the previous community that I worked for, I had a business I had walked in. She said, "This town sucks. No one buys my product." And it's real tough to tell a business that, well, maybe your product sucks and that's why no one is buying. And that gets real difficult. We tried sending a survey out. We found, you get that 1% response rate. It wasn't really effective. So what we do here in Wheat Ridge is every other year we do what's called a business walk. I get groups of volunteers. So I get about 30, 40 of them, and I group them into teams of 2 and 3 and send them out to different parts of the town to walk in businesses. They walk in the businesses and they ask them 4 quick questions. How's business? What do you think business will do in the next 12 to 24 months? What can the city do to make business better? And I forget what the 4th question is that we ask. And then they leave behind a packet of material from within the city, the county, and the state of information to help their business out. We're in businesses for about 2 to 3 minutes a piece. And walk out of there. We hit about 150 to 200 businesses every other year. And then we also, do you have any concerns? We ask them in the report. And our people there aren't to answer the question. They just do a check mark. Yeah, that business has a concern. Then it comes back to me. Here's what the concern is. I can send out the PD, planning, whatever that is. And so every other year we touch about 200-300 businesses in there. And it's a great, great system. And then we do a report out to council every year.
Yeah, and that's really good, Stephen. Thanks for jumping in there. And I think one of the things that you said there, promised you we're coming to you next year, but this, we talk about this all day. This is always so fun. But I would say that the one of the things that's really important on the BR&E side is make sure you're making it about what the company needs, right? Like focus your questions, and I love that approach, Steve, because it's quick. They're busy, and you're kind of just popping in. You got make sure that you're focusing what you're doing on something that's going to benefit. They see the value and the benefit of what you're trying to do. And it's not, well, I got to get these answers so I can report. It's more, I want to help you. Here's the things you need. And I think, Troy, you touched on that too, is really leveraging those relationships and building those over time. And you do that by having things that they're going to see value in. And if you can find those components, I try to always have something in my back pocket as a reason for my outreach when I'm talking to an existing business. So thanks, Steve. That was really helpful. All right, Mr. Drew, as a wholesale power supplier, what is Tri-State's role in assisting the business recruitment and retention initiatives, specifically in rural communities?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question because we're not a typical electric utility like Xcel. Nobody writes their power bill directly to us. We don't serve, building X in community Y, where they're trying to attract a new warehousing business or a data mining business or a new hotel. Tri-State doesn't have the information on bringing power to that site. We're not in the local communities as a wholesaler. And our first rule of business, I didn't sort of say this in my intro, but I'm running an economic development program for Tri-State. It's only a couple of years old. Tri-State's been around 70 years. We've always been supportive of our communities. But we've never had an economic development program. And the one we have now is pretty much just me without much of a budget. So we're trying to do what we can with what we have. And our first rule of thumb is do no harm. It's like the Hippocratic Oath. Our local member utilities, the rural electric cooperatives in rural Colorado, generally have very good relationships in their communities. I think in many cases, I'm sure a number of people on this call can attest to it. The local CEO or general manager of the rural electric cooperative is also on the board of the local chamber or the EDO. So they're plugged in. They have that relationship, and Tri-State doesn't want to interfere with that. But our member cooperatives also have very limited resources. Most of them are very, very small. and have, everyone on staff already wears 4 or 5 hats. They do member relations, and they're the IT guy, and they handle major accounts. So what Tri-State does is build relationships at the regional and state and local level. Part of my job is engaging with EDCC and its counterparts in the other states we serve. So in addition to being on the board of this organization, I'm involved in the Wyoming Economic Development Association, the Nebraska Economic Developers Association, the New Mexico Trade Group for Economic Developers, doing the networking, bringing in the knowledge, building relationships with peers around the country. And of course, that allows me to engage with people like Troy McHugh, who runs an economic development organization in our service territory. And anything I can do to help Troy and bring resources to him, provide additional heft to whatever he's doing locally, that's a big part of what I do. And then also building relationships at the state level. Again, our member cooperatives don't have the capacity or the resources to spend a lot of time getting to know staff at OEDIT, or again, the equivalent of OEDIT in our other 3 states. I also work with New Mexico, Nebraska, and Wyoming economic development groups, people in the governor's office, people that need to know who to reach out to. Because, in New Mexico, the state government people, they know PNM. PNM's the big investor-owned utility in New Mexico. In Colorado, it's Excel. The people at OEDIT know how to reach the people at Excel. If they have a prospect, if they have an existing company that wants to expand, build, a huge facility out by DIA, if they want to bring in warehousing businesses or data mining businesses, they know who to call at Excel and in New Mexico at PNM. And they don't necessarily know there's over 20 co-ops in Colorado. Nobody at OEDIT wants to make 20 different calls to 20 different co-ops. They don't necessarily have those relationships. So one of the things Tri-State's really trying to do is being a single point of contact for the co-ops, so the state can call us. I did recently get a call from the state of New Mexico saying we have a prospect, thought it was in PNM service territory, turns out it's in co-op service territory. We need to have a call with the site selectors in 2 days. And can you rally people from Tri-State to come in and talk about this prospective business coming in? And because I'm down in New Mexico, because I'm going to events, because I'm going to things like EDCC's Drive, Lead, Succeed conference, and I don't mean to make a shameless plug for EDCC, but that's why those events are important. That's where I engage with people from OEDIT. That's where I engage in New Mexico with people from the state economic development agency there, and they knew who to call to get information on how to serve this particular site because they didn't know people at our co-op. Then we engage our co-op and we bring our co-op in. So it's a nice chain of information, and it's providing kind of an economy of scale for all our co-ops to have a single entity, their wholesale power supplier, looking out for them. The other thing is, economic development at its best, it's what Steve Art described. It's very democratic. He reaches out to 200 businesses a year in his community. He's talking to everybody. Everybody has a voice. I don't think Steve only calls the businesses that he's buddies with or the ones that are most profitable. He calls all the businesses in his community and they engage. But at the other end of the spectrum, sometimes economic development can be I don't want to use words like elite or exclusive. But if you see what it costs to belong to the Denver Metro Chamber, for example, and I'm not slamming the Denver Metro, not the Chamber, the Denver Metro EDC, and it's a phenomenal organization and they do great work. And I am not besmirching them by any means, but Tri-State was paying almost $40,000 a year to be a member of the Denver Metro EDC. And you get your money's worth for sure. You get access to a bunch of people. You get invited to a lot of events where you get to network with site selectors. You get to work with OEDIT people. You get to build relationships with industry leaders across the state. It's awesome. Like I said, it's worth every penny, but your average rural electric cooperative can't pay 25 to 40 grand a year to be a member of an organization like that. Again, I'll bring up New Mexico as well. The New Mexico Partnership is a similar organization. Like the Denver Metro EDC, it's kind of an 800-pound gorilla in New Mexico. And they're the ones that network with the whole networking events with site selectors. They're the ones that organize these trade missions where we're going to bring business leaders from our state to Asia and do a tour of Asian businesses and trying to attract Asian businesses back. I mean, that stuff is expensive. And it's very important. And I'm glad they're out there doing. And there's often a ripple effect that benefits the entire state. But to belong to those organizations, again, the New Mexico Partnership, it's 10 to 50K to join their Economic Development Advisory Partner Program. Registration for the Site Selectors Guild Conference in 2024, I think it's almost 2,500 just to register. That doesn't include travel, hotel. So again, playing in those spaces can be expensive. And what we're trying to do as a wholesale power supplier is provide those services for our members, represent co-ops, and be an extension of their staff, and make sure that they can have a voice and a role in the economic development, business retention, and attraction process, and so that the states know who they are and they know who to contact at the state. And it's a long-winded answer, but that's really what we're trying to do.
No, I think that's really good, Drew. And I think when it comes to partnerships, right? Economic development's not done in a vacuum. And to Kim's point, there's limited resources for a lot of groups. Pretty much every group out there, even if you're a big city, you still have limited resources. So utilizing those partnerships, one of the benefits that we have, and I've been fortunate, I've only ever done economic development in Colorado. I think I've been spoiled because everybody plays pretty well in the sandbox together here. And I'm not sure it's like that other places. So that's the other great thing about EDCC and groups like this, is that we can all share things that we have done, and people are very open to having conversations with peers about things that they have, partnerships and groups and other things that they've kind of worked with to help. We used to do a kind of a rapid response team where groups like a number of different people in our community. This is when I was up in the Fort Collins area. We had a business that was coming into town, and we had the local partner from the community college there, and we had the local utility person there, and we had the various folks, depending on the business, that would be good for them to know. And we just had them, and we spent a little bit of time just kind of introducing them, and they were always kind of blown away with that connection. And we already knew each other.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't wait until a prospect came to get to know them. We'd been building those relationships over time. And then when it was time to kind of either meet with a prospect or go visit an existing business, we had that relationship already. So if you don't have that with your utilities or some of your other groups in there, and our good buddy Glenn just mentioned the Manufacturer's Edge, and they've got a great toolkit. If you guys haven't checked that out, I put the link in there. Another resource, right, is for your manufacturers and when there might be an opportunity to look at a Manufacturer's Edge and some of the things and resources that are out there already that you can get and they can make you aware of. So there's a lot of partners out there, and so hopefully nobody feels like they're in this all by themselves, even if individually their office is smaller and they're kind of a 1 or 2 person shop. There's resources out there and partners, and so things like this are I think really important to kind of leverage those.
Yeah, and it's the other advantage, I think, for Tri-State being a regional utility serving such a large area, is we get prospects that are kind of site agnostic. Here's what we want to build, and we'd like to be near a couple of these things, like a major interstate, a major airport, whatever. But they don't really care if they're in, if you find a good site for them in central Wyoming or northeast New Mexico or western Colorado, they come to us, say, here's what we need. And we say, well, we have this huge service territory. We can suggest some locations. So we have that advantage as well, is that we can take a regional view, and we're not just saying we have a specific site in mind with a specific building. Can you serve that specific building? That's where the local co-op really has the knowledge. But if they're agnostic on site and they just want to be somewhere in the region, we have the advantage of knowing the entire electrical system and saying, well, for that kind of load, for that kind of electrical load in a business like yours with your needs, we can suggest 3 or 4 places in this 200,000 square mile service territory that we have, and provide some options and give you an overview. And then when it comes time to bring in the local experts on, serving more specific sites in that community, we can make those connections as well. Almost like as if we're a site selector expert ourselves as a regional utility, in terms of picking the best locations for the prospect's needs.
Very good. Cliff, you contributed something nice. Why don't you unmute for a second, if you don't mind, and share if you got some of those key industry associations that you've found to be pretty helpful.
Yeah, I'll echo, and I'm sorry I'm not on camera today, but I will definitely echo the Denver Metro Chamber. We're a supporter of that organization and draw many contacts through that organization. The Colorado Advanced Manufacturing Association, we partner with them. We do have a annual Colorado Manufacturing Awards, and then also a summit that is great for your manufacturers. And then obviously the toolkit, if you have not checked it out yet, please check it out. The contact form, will have one of our team members reach out so you can learn more about Manufacturer's Edge. We are growing. We have an open position right now for a regional director in the Colorado Springs area. So we are a statewide organization and turning our resources toward that. Adam, one thing I'll take liberty to is just, I have been involved in the SBDC since 2011, and the contact for that, and really, a lot of the questions, I totally understand Steve Hart, but I've been on the other side of that where I've actually had to tell somebody at the SBDC, one of our clients, that their product sucks, and we need to take a look at that. So the consultants are ready to have conversations like that. The other thing is too, is to support this community better. There's a legislative ask for him this year you'll hear more about. And I think as a group, we just need to get behind that. So hopefully that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. Donna, sorry you were your last here to hit up, and I'm going to give you 2 in a row. So there you go. We'll give you some extra time here. First question, where does OEDIT get their leads from? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. There are really multiple ways we get the leads. There's really not just one stream, and a lot of them don't lead to prospect alerts. Some of them do, but there's really a lot of effort and time spent before we even send out these alerts. So one of them is, for example, trade shows. So we participate each year in trade shows. GBD selects these trade shows to support small businesses that are in Colorado already with their export efforts. So in 2024, for example, we have 6 trade shows. One is the Arab Health in Dubai, for example. Another one is the Singapore Air Show. And so each of the company has their own booth, with it free of charge to them to support them. But then also we have a general Colorado booth that allows us to talk to a lot of international companies. Project Hawk, for example, we sent that out, I think it was July this year. That was actually a German company and a battery manufacturer that we met at Hanover Messe. My colleague met at Hanover Messe, for example. So it's really showing us that it's worth showing up there as well, and get especially international companies that a lot of times don't even know where Colorado is, to be honest, to put Colorado on the map and just to have a real conversation about expansion, or just plant a seed to make them aware of Colorado. Another good opportunity is conferences and delegations around these conferences. So our team regularly goes to conferences just to learn a lot more about our industries, to really understand what's happening outside of Colorado. And a lot of time, these conferences are also a good opportunity to just exchange contacts, get into a conversation with other companies. But we also plan specific delegations around these conferences. So just 2 weeks ago, for example, one of my colleagues and I, we went to Finland, and we were a delegation of 10 around the startup conference. It's called Slush in Helsinki. And we had 4 Colorado companies with us in the green economy space. We had the executive director of the Colorado Clean Tech Association. And then we actually had someone from the Grand Junction Economic Partnership. So to give a local EDO the opportunity to also present on an international level. And yeah, during this trip, obviously the main purpose was supposed to support our small businesses, but we also got the opportunity to generate some leads that we will now follow up on. And then, as Drew mentioned, so the Metro Denver EDC organizes a few domestic trips in the US, and we also participate in them. They're usually targeted towards a specific industry. And yeah, it's just a great trip because we only meet with companies that have an interest in Colorado already or are ready to expand. So it's always a very fruitful conversation with these types of companies. Another very straightforward way to generate leads are site selectors that are approaching us. So a lot of times it's big firms like JLL, Newmark, or Deloitte with whom we regularly work with. But other times it's individual site selectors from across the country. They provide us with the information they have about the company or what they're looking for. And that's that doesn't take long for us to just put it in our prospect alert, and that's what you receive from us on a monthly basis, basically. There's also direct outreach from companies. I don't know how many times that happens on a local level, but we are regularly approached by companies just via email, like that they find on the website. just saying, hey, we're comparing a few states. Can we just have a conversation? And again, a lot of times it's just planting a seed. It doesn't necessarily mean that we see a result, but I mean, we have companies applying for incentives this month that my colleague talked to a year or a year and a half back. So sometimes it just really takes a long time to see the result of that. So our office, our team also directly reaches out to companies. So we use our strategy and analytics team. We use Moody's, for example, or PitchBook to look for companies that are actively considering expansion. And yeah, we do cold outreach via email if they're interested in a conversation about Colorado. We don't want to harass any company. It's really just like one email, and if they're open to a conversation, we're happy to set one up virtually. And a lot of times we see companies actually, again, not having Colorado on the map, but are interested and just positively surprised by our proactive outreach and have that conversation. Another thing is that is generally needs is the governor's yearly investment mission. So the goal of this mission is to promote more investment into Colorado, but also strengthen the relationship with another country that is strategically aligned with Colorado. So this year, the governor and team of OEDIT and the delegation went to Japan, for example, and Japan is Colorado's 6th largest export trade partner. So there's always a reason behind like how we choose these countries and communities. It's not random, it's very planned because, like I said, we are a small team. There are other states that do the work we do with like 70 economic development people. So we really try to be very targeted and yeah, just to see where we can generate leads and not waste anybody's time. Yeah, that's
Very good.
down. Yeah.
No, that's great. And a couple other follow-ups to that. One, so you mentioned the prospect alerts.
Mm-hmm.
You talked a little bit about those. So, you talked a little bit about how you get them, and then what happens kind of after, right? And how can we better work with you as different communities if there's things that you think would be good advice for us on those?
Yeah, just to maybe give you the background of like how we send out those prospect alerts. Like I said, we have all these different streams, like how we engage with companies, so how we present Colorado. And once a company is interested in Colorado, we usually set up a prospect call, which is usually like a 30 to 60-minute call, just talking about their project, their company, what are they looking for, and then we present Colorado overall. Obviously, we're neutral in terms of location. We just present all Colorado and give them a better understanding of our region. But we always mention our relationship with local economic development organizations. We talk about state incentives, what we offer, but again, we also always say we have a strong relationship with local economic development organizations. And it's important to remember that sometimes the incentive even surpass state incentives, so that they keep in mind it's important to also develop this relationship, and that we're not the only point of contact. We also offer state comparisons, for example. A lot of times they're obviously interested in other states as well. So sometimes it's a first call. It's not immediately a prospect alert. It's just a call that they want to have more data, for example. And again, sometimes that can be weeks or months of a back and forth before they say, okay, we're actually really interested in Colorado and we would like to see some of the sites. That's when the prospect alert comes into play. That's when we send them a template, or it depends if it's a site selector. A lot of times they send us the template, what they're looking for, and that is what we send out. So we have a list of local EDOs, which is regularly updated, but please, if anybody's on the call who thinks they should receive them and they don't receive them, please let me know either in the chat or email me after. We really want to make sure we reach everybody in the state. We're also we're checking the whole map right now if we miss anybody, but obviously there is a lot of turnover. It's a lot of local EDOs, so sometimes we might miss something. Sometimes we didn't catch that there is a new director or a new employee, so please just feel free to reach out. It's not on purpose if you don't receive the email. And we always send it out statewide unless there is a specific requirement, because if they say we really need to be 30 minutes away from the airport, then we don't want to waste anybody's time. We know it takes a lot of time and effort to prepare those, so we only send those out to the regions that fulfill these requirements. And then once we send those out, sometimes we don't hear back from them. So it's not just that we don't give you the feedback, but sometimes we send them the sites and we don't hear back. If we hear back and some of the sites are shortlisted and they're interested, we always ask them if they want to immediately get into contact with the local community, discuss local incentives, discuss demographics, maybe discuss workforce availability, whatever it is. And we're also happy to be the middleman, because sometimes a company maybe has 5 locations in Colorado, 5 in New Mexico, 5 in New York. So they don't want to talk to 15 communities, then we're happy to be the middleman. But again, we always offer to immediately talk to the locals. And a lot of time that's the case. And that's when we introduce you to the site selector or the company that is interested in your state. And then a lot of times it's parallel that we do the site selection and incentives. Because a lot of times, even if they don't know if they want to locate in Colorado, it's just good to know what kind of incentives they would get to have part of the decision maker. And so, a lot of times it's parallel. We support with the site selection, but also support them with the application for the incentives at the local monthly EDC meeting.
Very good. Yeah. And I'm sure everybody kind of knows this, but sometimes I hear it, when you send out prospects, there's information that needs to be gathered. And the truth is, that shouldn't be reinventing the wheel every time. I'm sure you guys save this stuff. I mean, a lot of it's similar every time. And in addition to that, if you've got, you're in your communities, you probably have a pretty good idea and some of the top real estate opportunities. And so working with your partners, whether it's the brokers for those sites or folks like Drew, put Drew to work and those utility guys, putting some of this information together ahead of time for you. So when things come along, you're not rushing to have to get them done in a week. You've got a lot of this stuff already. And then if you filled them out in the past, I have a whole database of things I filled out, and outside of having to update, some of the stuff, it's generally pretty simple to kind of get a lot of that information for some of these sites. So I'm sure a lot of you do that already, but I have heard in the past kind of some, we've got to come up with all this stuff in a week. And it's like, well, you really don't. Like, you probably have a lot of it already. So if you don't, start building some of that. All right, Dana, one last question here, because, and I don't want to put you on the spot. So, but I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here. What are like is there a big frustration that you see from our responses on some of these things that you would just like to say, hey, if you guys can just avoid doing this, it would be helpful. And it would, I don't know if there's anything that comes to mind about kind of a top, maybe a advice or, mistake that we all make when we're replying to some of these things. You got anything for us?
I wouldn't say any big frustrations. I think what I like, some of the communities send a letter with like a summary of the sites, because sometimes, we get, sometimes we have a project that we get 50 different sites, and then it's not just the sites, it's like multiple documents about one site, and then there is the incentive, and then there is the information on the local community. So it's like a big package, which is great because it gives a lot of information. But I think for when we send it off to the site selectors, it's a lot to work through. And so I just personally really like when there is like one cover letter, basically, this is the community. We're offering 3 sites. This is the name, this is the address, just to really get a good overview. And it's a little bit easier for them to get a grip on like, what am I looking at, instead of, because we send everything, like everything you send, we forward to them. We don't want to select any particular site or document. And it's just, again, it just can be a lot. And so for anybody who doesn't do it yet, who like to do it, I think like one short summary of what you're sending would be beneficial.
Very good. That's awesome. Thank you for that. All right, Troy, I'm popping back up to you. And you talked a little bit about this earlier, but what working partners in your community lend best to your BRE activities, and how do you work with them?
Yeah, you bet. And again, this is my rural setting, so we don't have quite as many layers or like say active trade associations. And I appreciate the Cliff, the additional information, because those are great ideas. Locally, we really rely on networking through our local Chamber of Commerce. We also try to stay plugged into our nonprofit community the best we can, whether it be historical preservation folks or whether it be the childcare folks and all of those that just help us make sure that we maintain a certain level of visibility. When it comes to really business expansion and attraction, we really focus a great deal at maintaining our relationships with our real estate community, with our real estate brokers. In the rural Lincoln County, there's just a handful. There's only about 5 different real estate brokers, whereas I know in the metro area, you have way too many to choose from. But if you could try to identify those key real estate folks that could help pass along new leads, because oftentimes it's our real estate professionals that hear about it first. And they say, hey, Troy, I've got a company. This is a truck stop that wants to look at Lyman for their next location. They're thinking about coming out next week. Would you like to be there at the meeting? Well, of course I want to be there at the meeting. I want to be that, help be that front person, or have somebody here from the office be there to get our information to them, talk about some of the local incentives that are readily available, and to try to do a really good job making sure that we're responsive and that we're providing all the information that we can up front. So real estate community probably is my number 1 for new business leads. Number 2 is local government, town hall, the city manager or the town manager and mayor, because oftentimes city hall is the first one that hears about a new business looking at our local community. And you need to have a good enough working relationship to where they'll just pick up the phone and say, hey, Troy, we got somebody new in town. Would you like to come in for a meeting? Or they at least will refer them over to us. And so I would say in my number 2 spot would be local government leadership, including the county administrator or land use administrator at the county level for our rural county. It's really important to hear from those guys to say, we got somebody coming and can you help us? Sometimes it is a, they don't always follow a real linear pathway. Sometimes it's a real casual way that they try to come in and by the way, and then other times it's a regular formal meeting. But having that visibility and being that resource for your local government, because you find out that city managers and commissioners and county administrators, oftentimes they're looking for somebody to kick that lead to, so that they can get on with their busy day. And really, in my opinion, it's the Economic Development Office that needs to be the front people. We need to be the people, the face to say, hey, welcome to Lincoln County. What can we do for you? What do you have in mind? Because oftentimes I've found that and I'm not picking on commissioners or anything, it's just that sometimes those that are politically elected to the spot maybe naturally a little suspicious to say, well, what are you up to? And I don't know if this is going to serve my constituency. Whereas in economic development, we're here to expand the local tax base and increase the business community. And so, yes, we're going to try to be as positive and use that salesmanship to get them invited in and to come to your community. So I would say that those are my 2 leading things: is real estate community and then the local government.
Yeah, and I think those are great points, Troy. And it's funny, in the metro area, even, and I'm sure a lot of you that work in this area know this, is like even the real estate community, while it's big, everybody's kind of got their own little sections. And so sometimes, you'll go, we're in the northern part of Denver, but you'll go and you'll talk to somebody in the southern part of Denver, and they won't have hardly any idea some of the stuff that's happening up north or where it is. They might have heard of the project, but they don't know. And same vice versa. It's like, I do stuff that's 30-minute drive away, but it's like, well, I focus on stuff kind of down in, I saw Jeff Hallwell here, John, down in Jeff Hallwell's area or something. They just don't know that much, and vice versa. So educating and building relationships with the real estate community is so important. We transitioned our marketing efforts a few years ago from more the national, site selector stuff. We rely more on our regional partners like Donna's group and Metro Denver EDCC and our local county one to do more of that, and just better bang for our buck was doing stuff with the local real estate community. And you can do some things that are really not that expensive to get them familiar with your community. And we've seen, them to be very responsive to that. Yeah, you're welcome, Jeff. We've seen them very, very responsive. They want to know more about what's going on because they're always looking for deals too. And they always want, the more information they have on communities and programs and sites, the better they're armed for their projects. So we've done some things over the years that have really targeted the real estate community, and we get about 65 to 70% of our leads from the real estate community in Thornton. So most of them come from the real estate community. They're by far our largest source. So great point, Troy.
Yeah, and it's amazing how the longer I'm in economic development, the more I realize that it's the most basic, being a good customer service of simply showing up, returning phone calls, returning emails. And it seems too simple. It seems like, well, anybody can do that. It's true, but oftentimes nobody else is doing it. And you need to be the one, or your office needs to be the one to make sure you get some sort of response out. Even if it's something a little generic, better than nothing. At least they heard from somebody, and then maybe you can start that conversation.
Absolutely. We're in the customer service business, right? And you're right. It's not rocket science, but I'm amazed at when I talk to, folks that reach out or some of our existing businesses, following up. And you guys, I'm sure, know this, but it's so important. If you meet with a business, and Steve mentioned this earlier, is they kind of have a checklist of things to follow up on. Make sure you do that. If you're talking to the existing businesses and you come away with something, get right on it. We know everybody's resources are thin, but it goes a long way. They recognize that you're going to follow up and do the things that you say you're going to do, and that helps really strengthen that relationship. So, all right, Drew, here comes one for you. So, what can utilities do to support the economic development environment across Colorado?
Well, I think Troy just touched on it, and you guys both just touched on it. And I don't think this was intended to be a webinar about manners, but manners are important. Returning phone calls, turns out it's pretty critical. And I've been at a couple economic development events. Sorry, Troy? No, I've been at a couple networking events in Wyoming and New Mexico recently, where a lot of economic development people said they were very frustrated because they get a prospect and they call the local utility and they say, what can we do to serve this spot? What kind of capacity do you have at this site? We have someone who wants to move it into the site. Can you get back to us and talk about the transmission infrastructure and that kind of stuff? And they don't hear back. And I see utilities are getting more and more involved in economic development. So when the rubber hits the road and that phone call comes for an actual prospect or business expansion opportunity, and the utilities aren't returning the calls, I really don't know why. I find that a little confounding and disappointing. Fortunately, I've heard about other utilities and not a tri-state or its member co-ops. And so far, I've really mostly heard it in Wyoming and New Mexico, not Colorado. So that's good news. But when the state of New Mexico called me about this prospect, and it was a really long shot prospect, they wanted it. They had like a 1,200 megawatt site. It was massive. But I got the right people on the phone very quickly, and my people were not very encouraging because they told these site selectors, look, this is probably a 10 or 15 year effort and probably well over $1 billion to build a generation to serve this prospect, to get the transmission to this particular remote location permitted. It's a big, big, big lift. We're not saying it's impossible. So, we gave it to them straight. We didn't sugarcoat it. But the important thing, they were very happy that we were responsive, that we returned the call, because apparently it's not as common as it should be. So, the first thing utilities can do is be responsive and be good partners in the game. Secondly, providing affordable, reliable electricity is kind of the bottom line. That's the main thing that utilities do. It's getting a little more complicated as we go through this energy transition, as we take more fossil fuels off the grid and add more renewables, which are more intermittent and provide maybe a less reliable form of baseload electricity. So, it's up to us to really manage the grid well and make sure that generation resources are going to be as reliable as they've always been. The threats from climate change, we're seeing, more wildfires, more avalanches and blizzards, all the things that can endanger transmission. We need to up our game in terms of maintaining the grid, upgrading the grid, fortifying the grid. Fortunately, there's a lot of federal dollars available right now to help utilities do just that. So you're seeing a huge investment in the national grid over the coming years. But the electricity thing aside, I started this conversation when I first spoke. I talked a lot about capacity, and the reason Tri-State does what it does is because our member cooperatives are small and don't necessarily have the capacity to attend a lot of meetings or build relationships or do the networking or take roles in statewide and regional organizations. That doesn't just include EDOs and economic development organizations, but also if there are task forces, if there are working groups, if there are conferences on the ED adjacent issues like housing and broadband and workforce training. I mean, these are all the things that ED people or economic development people are struggling with and communities are struggling with. And there's no reason utilities can't participate in a housing solution. I mean, we're employers as well. We have employees, and a lot of these, and those of us that live in the Denver metro area think sometimes it's a Denver exclusive problem that housing's scarce and unaffordable. But in rural communities, it's the same way. They don't have a huge inventory of homes. They're trying to attract people who now have the ability to work remotely because of modern technology. You can work for a company in London and live in Lamar, but you need a house in Lamar, and they're not always easy to come by. So utilities can certainly contribute to finding solutions on things like housing. Broadband, maybe we have a more direct solution because we have the infrastructure. You're seeing rural electric cooperatives create broadband subsidiaries because co-ops exist because nobody was bringing electric power to rural areas back in the 1930s. There was no profit to be made by the for-profit utilities, so that's why co-ops were developed with that nonprofit model to serve rural areas. And now we're seeing the same thing with broadband. There's not really a profit to be made. If you're a CenturyLink or another broadband provider, it's very hard to make money bringing that kind of infrastructure to rural areas where there are very few customers. So we're seeing a similar problem. Co-ops are trying very hard to contribute to the broadband solution. As I said, I think the National Rural Economic Development Association has said like there's about 250 co-ops nationwide that have started their own broadband subsidiaries. Since they have the infrastructure, they have the rights of way, they have the customer relationships. So they are a very good tool for bringing broadband infrastructure into rural homes. For its part, Tri-State, so we have that middle mile infrastructure. We have 6,000 miles of high voltage transmission line that brings the electricity from the generation source to a substation in the local community where it's then stepped down, the power is handed off to the local utility, which then has the line into the home. So with that middle mile infrastructure, particularly in Colorado, Tri-State has a lot of dark fiber. If we build a high voltage transmission line, we put dark fiber on it right from the start. Some of that dark fiber we use to control the system ourselves, but then there's a lot of just excess dark fiber just hanging there for 180 miles between community A and community B in Colorado. There's dark fiber. And if a broadband provider, if a Comcast wants to come to us and lease some of that dark fiber and add that middle mile infrastructure, we can offer a solution there. Now, we used to be more hesitant because our primary mission was building transmission lines, and we didn't want anything to interfere with that. And we weren't actively marketing our dark fiber because we were a little more insular thinking. But as broadband has become a bigger issue, and as we've become more interested, we're not for profit utility, but we're very interested in revenue. We like to bring in revenues to help keep our rates low. So if a Comcast, for example, comes to us and says, we want to lease X number of miles of dark fiber to help bring broadband solutions, for long distances across the state, we have something to contribute there. And we're more actively marketing that dark fiber so we can find partners and help get the broadband to the communities that need it. I guess the other thing I'll add, Tri-State's not doing this, but I'll make a plug for Excel because I know Excel is helping to sponsor this podcast or this webinar, and they do great work. And Excel has a real economic development program, and they've built a GIS site for their service territory where you can go and explore developable properties, and they have a site certification process they develop themselves. How valuable that is, I think probably depends on if you ask different site selectors in different states. It has different levels of value. Some states have their own GIS site where a site selector can come in and look at different warehouses and abandoned buildings and things and sites next to railroads. And so that's something else a utility can do if it has the resources. Tri-State hasn't gotten there yet. And for us, building a GIS site for 200,000 square mile service territory might not be feasible. I think it'd be a full-time job just to manage it, keep it up to date. We have so many communities in a service area that size, but that is something, those are things utilities can do. You don't want to be in Colorado, for example, you don't want to be redundant with things that OEdit are doing. But if there's a gap, if there's something the utility can provide that OEdit isn't in terms of site selection or certification processes, I think that's a viable role for utilities too.
Yeah, very good. You mentioned the broadband maps. I got a broadband map once from one of our suppliers, and I think I had to give up my firstborn child to get one. It was so hard. I guarded pretty closely. They were a troublemaker anyway, so I wasn't all that sad to do it. But they're hard to get those maps, that's for sure. One other quick thing, you mentioned Excel. All the different utilities, I'm sure, if you can find a provider in your area, whether it's whatever area and whatever utility you have that services you, and you have a good contact there, make sure to keep that relationship up. I'll give a shout out to Stephanie Henley with Excel. I just had a challenge that we were dealing with, and she was great, and she solved that problem. I don't know if she's on this or not, but just a shout out. If you're looking for a contact, make sure you find one at your local utility or your group like Tri-State to have those contacts, because they're really important. If something comes up, you might not know that you're going to need them, and then something will come up, and if you've got that one person that you can count on to kind of get back to you and get you some information, it's huge.
Yeah,
All
I'm
right.
surprised sometimes. If you're having a problem with your computer, and I tell you to call Dell, or if you're having a software issue, and I say call Microsoft, that just seems like a dead end. It's so intimidating to try and call big companies. And I don't think of Tri-State as being that big a company. We're certainly not a Fortune 500 company, but there are people that look at companies like Tri-State and Excel as these huge black impenetrable boxes. Oh God, I wouldn't know who to call. I wouldn't know who to call. So, that's a big part of the reason my job and my position exists, is so that there is a face for Tri-State out there in the communities and people can know who to call. And I get all kinds of inquiries for things that are way out of my area of expertise, but I know who, I can be a switchboard operator and connect you with the right person within the company so hopefully most utilities have good community relations teams. Certainly Excel does. They have regional people all over the state, and they have very good people. And that's a utility has to realize that not everyone knows how to reach it, who to call for certain. I mean, there's a customer service number, maybe a billing problem for billing issues, but for all these other things you might want to talk to your utility about, hopefully you can put a face to it and you have someone to call. And that's part of my role for Tri-State.
Yeah, absolutely. And to Kim's point in the chat, EDCC's role as well. If you're looking for a contact and you don't know who to go to, reach out to EDCC. Like I mentioned earlier, we are a group of Colorado Economic Development is a pretty tight-knit community. So, I think we're all here to help and work with each other. So, and EDCC can be a great kind of conduit to get you in touch with the right folks. All right, one more question for the group, and then we're going to open this thing up to anything that you guys have to share. Love to get some more engagement there. We want to be respectful of everybody's time. So this one's coming to you, Donna. Here we go. Can you give us an example of a rural as well as an urban community leveraging OEdit's incentives?
Can you repeat the question one more time? I lost my volume.
No problem. Can you give us an example for a rural as well as an urban community leveraging OEdit's incentives?
Yeah. So I think one of the incentives that is directly connected to your local community is the strategic fund. I don't know who of you have leveraged that incentives, but it's a cash incentives that gives companies up to $6,500 per net new job. But it does require a one-to-one match from a local community. So OEdit, for example, worked very closely with the town of Frederick to offer the life science company Agilent a strategic fund for their expansion efforts. So the town of Frederick worked together in Wales County and offered an incentive package that even exceeded the money that OEdit offered them. And I think that's just a great example of how to build a good relationship with a company that is interested in your community from very early on. Because a lot of times OEdit, we talk to them in the beginning, but then they're off to the local community and we don't always talk to them. But the company always have to engage with the local community, and having something like the strategic fund to show support for a specific project, I think is a great tool to utilize to show not only support, but maybe even differentiate yourself from another community. A more urban example is Meyer Burger, for example. It was basically simultaneously with Colorado Springs. It's a Swiss-German solar manufacturer, and they just announced a couple of weeks ago that they will locate in Colorado Springs. And they were particularly focused on that community because they had a building they were looking at. So we didn't do the site search for them, but they worked with a local community, and then they approached also Edit, and then we both supported them applying for the job growth incentive tax credit, and then the Colorado Springs Chamber offered them not a strategic fund, but like their own incentives on top of that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, let's kick it open to the crew here. You guys got questions for us? We're here to answer them. What do we got? More comments, thoughts? Aaron McCuskey, you still on? Are you still online? I'm gonna call you. You had a good comment earlier. I want to see if you maybe take a minute to explain the new
Yeah, I'm here.
the exit planning program.
Yeah,
Would you mind?
thanks for the platform. I'm the regional director for the Northwest Colorado SBDC. So just tagging on to Glenn's comment, which I appreciated. We have some great technical assistance partners for your businesses available for free in most cases across the state. But exit planning is particularly important when we're looking at the statistics. Between 60 and 80% of business owners plan to retire within the next 10 years. And so that can have a devastating impact in rural Colorado in particular, where we stand to lose really critical services. So in terms of starting new businesses, we're talking to a lot of startups about how buying an existing business is a much more secure path to successful business ownership. Your chances of success and your chances of profitability are much greater. But exit planning, commonly I think business owners think that exit planning starts when they're ready to retire and they look at how can I go sell my business. And it's really something that should be integrated from much earlier on of how to build a sustainable business model, how to build revenue, how to put processes in place so that you can transition the business to an employee or another local in your community. And the statistics also show 50% of businesses are forced by external factors, so they're surprises. So by helping our business owners work on their exit plan and their contingency plans earlier, even at the startup phase, it's helping to ensure that a business doesn't suddenly close when a health emergency arises or, all of the variety of factors that can impact an individual. So we're excited. We put a lot of work into partnering with the Exit Planning Institute to get some of our consultants to be certified exit planning advisors. Typically, those are attorneys and CPAs who have that certification, but now we have people who can work on an educational basis with our business owners to help understand what is their value and how can they grow their value. It's not a certified valuation, but it's a great educational tool for business owners to understand what is their value of their business and how can they grow their value by implementing some of those safeguards. Totally free service available through all of the SBDCs, so you can reach out to your local contact.
Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate that. Sorry, I put you on the spot, but you had a good comment. I wanted to elaborate on it a little bit more. Other questions, thoughts? Maybe Troy, you got any kind of parting? Oh, wait, Steve Art's coming off here. What do we got,
I
Steve?
Dana, you talked about the employee incentive, $6,000, 60, whatever you said, with a local match. Define what type of jobs these have to be. Could these be retail jobs? Could these be fast food jobs?
So there are 3 criteria to be eligible for that incentive, and it has to be a competitive project. And a lot of times I assume a retail job could be one, but if it's just adding retail jobs to a business that already exists, that wouldn't qualify. So it has to be a competitive project, meaning a company is considering other states as well. And then it depends on the average annual salary because it has to be equal or higher, same with the tax credit, than the average annual salary of the community. And a lot of times those jobs might be paid below that. So it really depends on the project. But in theory, if there is a fast food chain saying we want to open a new facility and we decide between Colorado and New Mexico, and they make that amount of money and it's competitive, yeah, then in theory, but it really depends on the project.
Thank you. And that competitive process where you say, could just a letter from them saying we're considering New Mexico be sufficient?
No, there's actually a obviously we can never prove it, but we ask for some evidence. So we send out called a cost comparison analysis, and with a few line items to say, okay, when you looked at other states, what is the labor cost, for example? What is the utility cost? Like just to get an idea of like that they actually look into another state.
Thank you.
The only other thing I would offer in my parting comments from a rural perspective is that I feel like business attraction and expansion sometimes are more event driven or larger companies that are coming to look and you respond the best you can. Whereas my retention activities, I feel like in my body of work is more everyday visits, calls, and things that we're servicing our existing community. And so that's kind of the pace that we fall into. Building on Drew's comments, anymore when it comes to site selection and when we get something from the state of Colorado, so few of those leads fit our rural community because number one, we either don't have existing warehouse or we don't have the existing maybe greenfield site that's just right for those leads. Always looking at water, power, and broadband. And those are such huge drivers anymore for project viability. And so I see many leads that go through our small community and say, well, we're going to have to pass on that one. And another thing we run into pretty quickly is if they're going to have workforce needs in excess of 100 people, those are all going to have to be imported in because we don't have that much existing workforce to fill those jobs. And so then when you want to import those folks in, then you hit a housing problem. So this is like a vicious cycle. We're all on this loop to where it seems like in many rural communities, we would love to harness larger companies, but we've got to keep building out some of these other community amenities, namely housing and childcare, before we can accommodate them. So it's a constant challenge and love doing it.
Thanks, Troy. And Drew and Dana, we'll get to your parting shots here in a second, but it looks like Cliff Harold popped off. Let's hear what Mr. Harold has to say.
Thanks, Adam. I appreciate that. The other suggestion I would make about it really pertaining to both existing businesses and attraction of new businesses is don't overlook your startup community. Don't overlook the entrepreneurial ecosystem in your community, because whether it's co-working space or it's incubators, accelerators, or even venture capitalists, they're all working with businesses that can grow into something more material, more substantial. And you want to be in contact with those businesses earlier in their life cycle rather than later in their life cycle. And even an organization like Techstars, well-known accelerator, tech accelerator, when they're organizing their cohorts, their training cohorts, they're often bringing people in from around the country, even in some instances around the world. And so in an average cohort that they held in Boulder, I would say half of those participants aren't from Colorado. And some of them will stay just naturally, but the more you're connected with those kinds of resources, the better your opportunity to make the connections that are with the individual participants in those programs. And, Rocky Mountain Venture, Innosphere Ventures, Mike Freeman's group, Peter Adams' groups. I mean, they just have a constant pipeline of businesses in and out. And you want to be as connected to those as you possibly can be, especially if they've got a presence in your local community.
Awesome. Thanks, Cliff. Very good.
Thank
Drew,
you.
you got about a minute of parting shot here.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of reemphasize some of the things we talked about in terms of don't be afraid to contact your utility with something other than a question about electric supply and transformers and the transmission grid. And we are very interested in bringing economic development and supporting our communities. Selfishly, it helps us sell more power, but unselfishly, co-ops in particular really are members of the community. We have great interest in serving rural areas in particular, and we want to help. So if we can join a meeting on workforce development at the local community college, please invite us. And if you can't identify a contact at the electric utility, call your local economic development organization, call EDCC, call me. We can connect you with people because we're not big black boxes. And we also may have some thoughts if you're trying to target, if you're putting together a strategic plan for your community on what kind of businesses you should target. What's appropriate for us? What industry should we focus our efforts on? What's a viable future for our community in terms of building an industry cluster? Include your local utility in that conversation, because they may have some real thoughts on the most viable types of businesses they can serve given their electrical capacity. They may come to us, their wholesaler, and have a strategic conversation with us about what kind of businesses they should be attracting. And that way, there's some agreement up and down the food chain there. And when a prospect comes in, you're better prepared for it. You've already had some of those foundational conversations with your electric utility. It's an attractive load for them. So, you're starting off on the right foot that way. So just don't hesitate to call us and talk to us about anything.
Great. Thanks, Drew. Donna, parting shots?
Yeah, just one thing, Bobby, thank you for putting the presentation in. So there is a link to a presentation that has all of our programs, incentives, like a nice overview. So click on that. But then also, similar to what Drew said, please never hesitate to contact us. Not just when you talk to a company, but if you have any questions about incentives, about programs, even if our team doesn't know it or manages the program, we can direct you to another division, to another agency, to another industry association, whatever it is. Again, please feel free to contact us with any questions you might have. Again, also not a black box. Really happy to engage more with you on a local level. And yeah, thank you again for joining today.
Thanks, Donna. Parting shot from me. Education. I'm a big proponent of that across the board. Educating your, the leaders in your community, from the elected official side to boards and those folks. And a good way to do that. Businesses are usually pretty interested in showing themselves off. So we do a lot of tours in the city to help our leaders understand better what's going on in these buildings and why economic development is so important and why we do what we do. And then the other thing I would mention is don't forget about internal teams. I realize I'm in a municipality, but regardless of even if you're not, you've got planners, you've got engineers, you've got folks in your building and fire departments. Make sure you're educating them too on what you do and why you do it, because the more that they understand, the more you're going to have partners there. Regardless, we're going to need them to get projects through the process and done. And so the more that they understand why we're doing it, I think the better. And to just jump on what Cliff had mentioned a little bit earlier, we actually have a kind of small business team that's kind of the creme de la creme, if you will, of the most customer service oriented planners and building department folks, and those guys that when a small business has a challenge because they don't understand the process as well and they don't have the time to really dig into it, we have these folks kind of on alert, and we'll just go out to their business and we'll meet with them directly and talk about what they need to do in as kind of straightforward as way as possible. And they're all real customer focused, solution oriented people, which we found to be really, really helpful, particularly for our small businesses. Okay. Respecting everybody's time, Kim, I'm going to kick it back over to you to wrap us up.
Thank you, everyone, so much for presenting today and being a part of this. One other thing that I wanted to add that was not highlighted as much is that there's a workforce component to this too. So in your retention, part of the issues that might be arising is not being able to find the type of talent that they need in order to be able to hire and to expand. So making sure that your workforce teams are absolutely in your, I'm going to call it a Rolodex, but they have to be at the tip of your finger as well in your toolbox of supporters, because they will help either help train or do the hiring process, or going even further into community college systems or trade schools in order to develop programs to support those industries that are in your community. So I just want to make sure to do a shout out to our workforce, and maybe we'll do another 2.0 on this, on how workforce can really support your business retention and expansion and attraction campaigns. So with that, I just wanted to say thank you so much to our contributors today. We really appreciate the time and effort that you put together to put this programming together, as well as sharing your insights and knowledge on this subject. And again, I have to thank the City of Westminster and Xcel Energy for supporting us in this Knowledge Network series, and helping us bring this type of information to our professionals. And again, to our professional development committee, we can't do it without them, but they are a fun group of folks. If you want to join them, they meet once a month. And it's just a great way to not only give back to the community, but then also to increase your knowledge as well. So follow-up items, very simple. Send those questions to Bobby at bobbyvandenheuvel@edcconline.org. And then also the link to the recording and presentation, we'll have all of that over to you by next week. We'll just be buttoning up the video and getting it ready for prime time. So be watching out for that in your inbox. But in the meantime, Bobby did drop in a survey into the chat section. We can't bring quality content without knowing what it is that you all want to hear about. So please take this very quick survey. It's 4 questions. And it really does help us develop the content and the programming that you all want to help you in your professional career. So please fill out that survey. Again, visit us at edcconline.org/events-calendar. Where we will be updating our events and programming for next year. I also wanted to give a quick shout out for our membership survey, which will be dropping here in the next week. Again, that membership survey is really going to help us really tailor the content and events and what we are delivering to our members to make it most valuable to you. And then please join us for our legislative day at the Capitol. So we will be kicking off in the morning at the Capitol. We'll actually have some time on the floor and meet with some of our legislators. And then we will walk over to the First Baptist Church of Denver for our luncheon. Last year, we had an extraordinary turnout, about 120 people, and we had many legislators join us. So help us invite your legislators to be part of this event. Again, it's an educational opportunity every step we go. Legislators turn over all the time, and so we know that this is a roundtable of educational opportunities. So help us in that effort. And then any additional tools or resources, network of your economic development community in the state of Colorado is all at edcconline.org. I want to wish you all a very happy and safe holidays. We are very pleased and happy to have you with us, and we will see you in the new year. So thank you, everybody.